Mike Norvell has been incredibly successful in the transfer portal. That's not some kind of breaking news. That's not something that you're not aware of. In fact, he and Lane Kiffin and maybe some other guys that fall just behind those two have been dubbed the Portal King or the Portal Kings, if you consider both of them. But what makes both those guys, and specifically Mike Norvell, so successful in the portal? Why has he hit at such an incredible rate? Why has he had more success, really, in production than anyone else? Lane's landed some big guys, but nobody has produced at the level that Norvell has through the portal. We've talked about why he had to use the portal, the necessity of it, and how in an ideal situation, he probably wouldn't even have had to have done that, but he had to when he got to Florida State to rebuild this roster. He also met the opportunity of the transfer portal, which was brand new when he got to Florida State at the perfect time. But what truly makes him so successful there? I got a chance to sit down with Mike Norvell on Sunday, and I asked some of our Discord members for questions. What would you like me to ask Mike Norvell? I try to be different. We try to give Patreon members some peek behind the curtain or some access that they wouldn't normally get. And so instead of me coming up with questions, I asked our members, what would you like to ask Mike Norvell? We try to do fun stuff like that from time to time, so go check out our Patreon if you haven't already. But Mike Norvell had an interesting response to why he was so successful or why he has been so successful in the portal. Listen to that, and then let's talk about it.
I think a little bit of knowing what we're looking for. It kind of goes back to we're trying to build a team, and we want to be able to make sure that if there is a need in an area or there's something that can come and make our football team better, and if it's coming from a transfer, so you have to be right. I mean, you better dang sure have a great sense of confidence in it, because that's when you have the experience, when you have those guys. And on the flip side of it, you still look at guys. There's been so many transfers that we brought in that had multiple years, and they've it's something that I've really enjoyed watching, because these guys that have come in, yes, most of them have made a big impact in year one, but then you still see that steady growth in year two, and that's where it's fun to watch that on my end. But we have a pretty good sense of the why. Why is this young man the right fit for us? As we go through the accelerated recruiting process, just knowing that these guys know that they know what to expect when they walk in the door, and I think there's a lot of confidence on both ends.
When you think about their hit rate, it is ridiculous. If you just look at the last 2 years, which maybe it's cheating to do that, and we won't do that, but if you just look at the last 2 years, it has been astounding, their actual hit rate. If you go back into the 2021 season, the portal class that entered that season, there were more misses, right? You'd say that, Keir Thomas was a hit. You'd say that Jermaine Johnson was a hit. You'd say that Dylan Gibbons was a hit. Jamie Robinson was a hit. But there were a lot of guys in that class that you'd say were misses. Milton wasn't a miss. McClellan wasn't a hit. McClellan wasn't a hit. Parchment had the big play against Miami, and maybe you'd consider him a hit just for that play, but Brian Cushing wasn't necessarily a hit. So they were about 50-50 in that first class. But then you look at what they did in 2022. You look at the guys that they brought in that were absolutely hits: Tatum Bethune, Dimitri Emmanuel, Trey Benson, Micah Pittman, Jared Verse, Johnny Wilson. A couple of the guys they brought in, you'd say weren't hits or misses. They truly just didn't get a chance due to being injured. But you had Bless Harris in that group. You had a lot of talent. Jazz Turrentine was in that group. I'd say they probably went like 7 for 11 on hits and hits over total players in 2022, and two of those guys, Lyles and Winston Wright, were injured. So really, they went 7 of 9. It continued to be great last year. I'd say of the 11 guys they took in the portal, there were 7 or 8 well-defined hits. Fintrell Cypress, Casey Roddick. You look at Braden Fisk, Keon Coleman, obviously. And then you've got some other guys in that group that were misses. I'd say they probably missed on 3 or so. Then you've probably got 3 guys that are still TBDs, to be determined. It's hard for me to really evaluate where Kyle Morlock will end up. It's hard for me to evaluate where Juice Cryer will end up. You've got other guys who can still get in and make a massive impact. Byers still here. Keandre Jones still here. But when you look at the total numbers, if you take injuries out, I think Florida State hit on a rate of about 19 of 25, maybe 18 of 25 over the last 3 years. If you take out injuries and then TBDs. You're looking at the last couple of years. If you take out injuries and to be determined, you're talking about like 13 or 14 out of 17 players. Well, why have they been so good? Mike Norvell answered it. He talked about knowing what they were looking for. He talked about trying to build a team, being very confident in how they process things. Earlier in the day, he had answered a question with us about the roster makeup, the roster breakdown. And right now it's about 65-35 high school to transfer. And he's just confident in knowing what he needs. He went into and he dove into, and I'm not going to play the entire clip for time's sake, but he dove into the fact of knowing how to bring somebody in who can help a young guy along. Knowing how to bring a Jared Verse in, because not only is Jared going to give you what you need in that room, but what's he going to do for Pat Payton bringing him up? What are guys like Braden Fisk and Fabian Lovett going to do for your Darrell Jacksons and your Josh Farmers that you're trying to develop up? What's a guy like Keon going to do for the younger wide receivers? I think Florida State's brought in, 6 blue chips at wide receiver over the last 2 years. What's a guy like Keon or Johnny do for those guys? And that was his point, is knowing how to build that team, having the idea of the end in mind, having the idea of what their goal is, being intentional, and then just having confidence in that. Hey, this is how we want to build a team, and we're going to go out and do it. I want to talk about the most important part that I think everybody misses with the transfer portal, what most people just completely ignore and they miss on totally. But first, I want to give a little bit of love to my friends over at the Mango Board. If you've watched any of our softball videos, which I know a ton of you haven't, but if you've watched any of our softball videos, I've introduced them, and so I'm going to give them to you guys now too. What is the Mango Board? Now, they are a group that is simply trying to get the word out about the best fruit that you can possibly buy at your local grocer. If you don't believe me, you should. My kids go absolutely crazy for mangoes. We cannot keep them into the house, and we do pick them up weekly when we stop by Publix. The Mango Board is also a proud supporter of FSU, so here's what I need you guys to do. You don't have to click a link. You don't need to enter a code. Just grab a couple of mangoes the next time you're at your local Publix or your local grocer. Tag me on social media. Let me know that you did. It is physically impossible to be upset while you're eating a mango, so give it a try today. I appreciate the Mango Board for their support of not only FSU athletics, but also this channel. The next time they're at an event, make sure that you swing by and tell them that you heard about them on Double Fries No Slaw. The big thing that everybody misses when it comes to the transfer portal, and that no one seems to talk about when they talk about it just being a fad or not sustainable or whatever the situation is, though the people who said that for years and years and years are now copying Mike Norvell's MO, his strategy of going to the portal to kind of go all in on things. The big thing that people miss is the multiple years that you get out of guys. And Mike Norvell mentioned this. He mentioned the impact that they can sometimes have in that first year, but how big that second year has been. When you look at how many guys that they've gotten over multiple years, it is more than 50%. Now, obviously, last year, Jaheim Bell, Roddick, Gilbert Edmond transferred back, and Braden Fisk, Keon Coleman were only one-year guys. But the rest of them, Morlock, Byers, Cypress, Jackson, Keandre Jones, were all multi-year guys. Winston Wright, even though it was like a year and a half, Tatum Bethune, Dimitri Emmanuel, Trey Benson, Deuce Spann, Johnny Wilson, Jared Verse, all multiple-year guys. Gibbons, Jamie Robinson. You can go back to 2021 and you see that as well. And that's a massive part of it. And here's why and what gets overlooked. When you get a true freshman, if he is elite, he's going to be on your campus for 3 years. That first year, he's going to be very limited. He's not doing a ton. And then you get him for 2 good years. What is the difference between bringing in a transfer like Jared Verse and having him on your campus for 2 years, or getting Jared Verse out of high school and having him for 2 productive years? Jared Verse would not have played at Florida State in a true freshman season. There is literally no difference. It is the exact same. What's the difference in getting Johnny Wilson as a true freshman and him doing nothing, but then having 2 good years and then going to the NFL? It's the same process. Now, would you maybe have a chance to have somebody for 3 or 4 years? Possibly. But I think when you weigh all of that, if you're doing what you need to do and you're putting guys into the league like Florida State is doing again, having a guy for 2 years out of the portal is just as good, if not better, than getting them as a recruit, especially if they've already had some of that development. Keon Coleman was a ready-made player that was ready to go for you. Florida State didn't develop Keon Coleman. That's no shot at Florida State, but he was a player that everybody in the country wanted, and you just went out and got him immediately. He talked about knowing the why, knowing what the players wanted and what Florida State wanted out of the player. The chance to compete, the need to be developed, the NIL, playing time, whatever the situation is, Florida State finds out very quickly the why, and then they find out why that player may fit what they're looking for as well. I think we've heard about this and we've talked about this a ton too, but the accelerated recruiting process, the way that the portal moves so incredibly fast is mind-blowing. And Verse and others have talked about how Florida State was one of the very first ones to reach out to them. And that makes a huge, huge difference. When a guy ends up in the portal, Florida State is most of the time, if they're a target, one of the very first to reach out. And that's why they have so much success. Florida State's been innovative with it. They're better than anyone else at it, and we'll see how they did this year in the portal. 247 has already given Mike Norvell and Florida State an A+ when you look at their haul in the portal. So national folks are expecting big things again. But it was cool to hear the words out of Mike Norvell's own mouth, the words coming from him directly as to why they're successful in the portal. It's not something he shies away from. It's not something he's ashamed of. It's not something that he's trying to hide behind. Oh, I've got to use the portal as a crutch. And oh my God, the rivals say that it's not sustainable. It doesn't care. Not worried about that. We embrace it. We can build our team this way. We're going to continue to go get playmakers out of the portal. We're going to continue to go get guys that we can develop and move forward. Look at Trey Benson coming in with 6 yards before he got to Florida State, and then he ends up being RB2 taken to the NFL draft. Obviously, you know who Trey Benson played for before he came to Florida State. A certain coach that's down in South Florida now. But Florida State is going to continue to do that. They're going to continue to go get guys that either had great performances where they were before or guys that they know that their staff just isn't getting enough out of them, a la Trey Benson playing for Mario Cristobal. Played for Mario Cristobal, 6 yards. Played for Mike Norvell, second round of the NFL draft. I'm expecting big things from Mike Norvell's portal class this year, and I think it's going to be another one that you look back and say, wow, how did he do it? Nobody's even talking about Marvin Jones Jr. We all expect big things from Malik Benson and others, but I think this portal class is going to be nasty again. I think you're going to continue to see Mike Norvell dominate in the portal class year over year. And it was, again, fun and exciting to hear from him embracing and telling you why he's so good in the transfer portal. Listen, I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you haven't caught up on any of our coverage on the FSU versus ACC we had Doug on earlier this week, you can click the video on the screen now to check it out.